Okay, can you guys see my screen? Okay, so then I would minimize this real quickly. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Betül Yildiz, and today I'll be talking about my thesis, which is if design science is ready for low resource environments, and it's taking place in Mali, and it's regarding the seed value chain in Mali, and my supervisor is Anna Bon. So before we want to move on and answer the title of this thesis, it's really important to also consider the setting. So the setting which we're currently in is a low resource environment, especially a rural region, which is awfully important to know because if we have a problem here, we can't just have a solution and try to implement the solution that we have here or there, because there are just some different restrictions, like an internet connection which is usually not available, or just some cultural differences. So that's important to take into consideration. And also why it's relevant to help them there. Well, there's a huge food insecurity problem in Mali, and if we help them with their food, with their seed value chain, we can maybe tackle a part of that food insecurity, which is obviously really great. And a solution, which of the method, if we want, how we want to tackle this problem, is by implementing an ICT artifact as a solution. And the reason that we want to do this, that we opted for an IT artifact, is because, well, in the agricultural fields here in the first world, IT has helped enhance crop drastically. So if it works here, can we just adjust it a little bit more so it can also work in the third world, so we can try to help them with the food insecurity problem. Now, if you look at the map in Mali, and the seed value chain in my thesis is regarding the distribution of the seeds from the beginning to the very end. And if you look at this map, you can see that I am a farmer and I have 200 kilograms of rice to sell. Tom, on the other hand, wants to buy half of my stock, which is great. That makes me a really happy farmer because I can sell my product. But there's one problem, because I'm not aware that Tom is willing to buy my rice, and Tom also is not aware of my existence as well. So there's just some parallel clash. There's no method of communicating between us unless I happen to know Tom personally, which I don't. So what we actually want to do with the seed value chain in Mali, because this problem is very recurring there, is we want to improve on the communication between the different stakeholders. In this case, for example, me as a farmer and Tom as a customer. And we want to understand the seed value chain better, because if we want to implement some sort of communication method between them, we need to understand the setting that we're in. So those two things we want to tackle, the communication between the stakeholders and making the whole process more transparent so we can understand what's going on. Now, who again are the stakeholders? I've got in total 9 stakeholders, which I thought would be the most important. They are categorized into 4 subgroups. For example, you can see at the very top the seed producers. A farmer is an example of a seed producer, and at the bottom you can see, like, in the middle, I mean, the radio stakeholder, which is responsible for some sort of communication. And on the right-hand side, you can see some comments the stakeholders have made regarding the current seed value chain. And the comments which have a thick border are comments regarding bad communication, and the comments that, who do not have a thick border are just some regular other problems. So for example, in the very middle, you can see that a comment a stakeholder has made is that there are not enough smart devices, or another comment is, where can I buy my seeds? So because you can see that there are more problems regarding communication, you can see the significant impact it can have on the seed value chain if we try to improve on the communication between these stakeholders, which is the goal. Well, how can we do that? So we want to, like I said in the beginning, create 2 artifacts. One, to enhance transparency so we can understand what's going on in the seed value chain and try to improve on that. And the other one, an ICT artifact, which which helps the stakeholders communicate better with each other. And in this case, a visual dashboard would be ideal. So the farmers can put in the stock they have, and the customers can read where they can buy that certain stock. And a method of doing this is the design science research method. And the reason why I've chosen for that is because design science is known to create artifacts, which is what I wanted to do in the first place. So Hefner has put down 7 guidelines, and these guidelines will help a researcher put in an artifact. So my goal is to then understand if I can use these 7 guidelines to then create my 2 artifacts. If I can create these 2 artifacts successfully with these guidelines, then we can say that the guidelines by Hefner for design science are applicable in a low resource environment. Now here's the first thing that I did, the first kind of artifact. It's the current analysis of the seed value chain. And it might look okay in the beginning. It's just how it's currently operating. But for example, at the very bottom, you can see that the radio stakeholder is supposed to inform the local customers and wholesale customers, but is not systematically informed himself. So there's no direct line from like the farmers to the radio or the stakeholders to the radio, which systematically um, gives information. So if you happen to know someone, you are aware of the stock, but if you don't know anyone, you are not aware of what's going on. So it's a little bit too decentralized. So what we want to do is put in a dashboard that you can see here in the middle. And this dashboard, it just creates more a centralized approach. So a farmer, you can see at the middle left, updates the dashboard with the seeds that he has. And then any other stakeholder can just request information from that dashboard. So everyone is always up to date with what's going on. So remember that example that I gave in the beginning where I was selling something and Tom was buying another thing and we did not know of each other's existence? Well, that would not be the case anymore because I would have been updated the dashboard and Tom also can read what I'm selling in that dashboard. So we thought that creating a dashboard would be a good idea to tackle the communication problem between the stakeholders. So we sat down with the people of Mali, some correspondents from Mali, and we had a little call and asked them what they would like to see in a dashboard. And on the right-hand side, you can see a visual design that we have created, like it's a draft. And now you can see the actual thing that we have put together. So it's a website. We built it with Flask in the Python 3 backend with a Bootstrap framework. And here at the very front, for example, you can see that they're different, like seeds. And these seeds have different varieties. For example, maize, which is obviously corn. If you have Cooperative UUL LPC, it sells, it has some certain corn variety in stock, and you can find it if you want. You can go there and buy it. So this is exactly what they wanted. Now, like I just said, the analysis of the problem, that went great with the Hefner's guidelines. However, when we created the dashboard, I remember at the very last call that we had, in that call, point 3, it's important to design some sort of evaluation. So that's what we did. We had created a survey. And that survey, we asked them to fill it out so that we could understand if the dashboard was actually helpful or not. I still have to wait for an answer for that dashboard, for that survey. So it kind of explains to you that we cannot really expect them to take the same approach in implementing an artifact as we. Like it's a bit too academic. It's a bit too much of a too systematic for them. So you can see like I made some bubbles which like said like I am a farmer, why should I care about the scientific contribution or research rigor, what I just want to buy some seeds. It's a little bit too it's not human centered enough. It's not an ideal method to try to implement an ICT solution in that region. So what can we conclude from this? If you want to have like a thorough understanding of what's going on there, you can use these guidelines by Hefner. They're just great. On the right-hand side is just, it's a great method to do so. But if you try to implement an actual solution that they're going to use and you want to incorporate them, it's not necessarily that great. It definitely needs some further research to understand what would be great. And another example, and Anna just told a quick story just about her own framework, the ICT4D 3.0 framework. So in my thesis, I actually talk a little bit more about that maybe the next time, not this method, not the 7 guidelines could be used, but Anna's framework. So if you then have some further research upon that, we can conclude if it's right. But I can say from this research that I don't think that the 7 guidelines of Hefner are applicable in this situation. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Betül. So the floor is open for questions. Are there any questions from the audience? I don't see them.
Yeah, I have a question. Okay. I was missing a bit one of the reasons why the framework of Hefner is not applicable for ICT4D context. I would like to understand that a little bit better.
So one of the things was, for example, the evaluation method. It's not really what I experienced. I had to draft it on some sort of evaluation method, and I expected them to like fill it in so I could understand if it was well enough. But the problem there is, well, they can just give an answer and I would then be happy with my answer. But because the situation is um, so unstructured, it can change within a few days. Like I think Anna just said, they might not have internet connection today, but in 2 weeks they might have that. And I don't think those guidelines really take that into account. It's a bit too structured and
Yeah,
academic.
well, wait a minute. Something goes wrong here. I think that if you look at the work of Hefner, he doesn't prescribe which specific evaluation method you have to use. He only prescribes that you have to use a or perhaps multiple evaluation methods. So I wonder if this is really a, let's say, shortcoming of the framework of Hefner, or that it is more in how you apply this specific framework in the context of ICT4D.
I think it may be that the second one.
Isn't it the case that there are different traditions in design science, actually the same name, that have a different background? Design science, as you use it, is the work of Hefner, comes from basically researchers from business schools, the MIS branch of business schools, that do not design things themselves, but talk about designing. And that's they Hefner and colleagues market their own approach as the social science approach to design. And that is very different from what we see in other disciplines. You have actually books with the same name, that design science, that come from engineering design, mechanical engineering, computer science actually is part of that. And then the emphasis is on making these artifacts. And you have yet a third approach that you find both in social and technical sciences. Their design science is related to social innovation, as you find it in architecture or public space planning or cities. And so I think that the approach by Hefner is, let's say, in a positivist way, observing what design is doing, but what we are interested in ICT4D is also making things that work. So I think you have to separate these three traditions, certainly if you want to have an interdisciplinary approach.
No, exactly. I also think that I kind of narrowed it down a little bit too much because design science is actually pretty broad. Um, and I did not, that's why I also put that it needs some further research because I'm not exactly aware of all the different disciplines that you described, which maybe another discipline would then be more suited in this certain situation.
Okay, thank you, Betül. And it's also worth mentioning that the work of Vlad and Betül that fits into the broader, let's say, research that we are doing on voice-based technologies for the rural farmers in Mali. That these are parts of it, so that Betül is tackling a part of it, and it's not the full research, but she tackled so the dashboard. And Vlad tackled the yes and no speech recognition, which is also part of this bigger project. So now I move to the next speaker,